Welcome to Inside Out, Mental Health at Work and in Life, where we are exploring why workplaces feel the way they do, what it takes to build cultures that support genuine well-being. I'm your host, Catherine Eady, and today I'm joined by Andy. Welcome to the show, Andy. Before we dive into the topic of mental health at work and in life, for people meeting you for the first time, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for the invite to come on here, Catherine. It's great to want to see you again. I think the last time I saw you were actually working through the qualification that I did with you as well at Mental Health Scotland as well. So it's great to be on the podcast. But yeah, my name is Andy Coley. I am predominantly a leadership development trainer. I also do a lot of keynote speaking around mental well-being, emotional intelligence, and leadership. And I'm a trained neuro-linguistic programming trainer, which is all about mindset and how you process the world, and is really useful for coaching and training. So yeah, I predominantly work within workplaces to support teams and leaders in having better conversations and better days at work because of we spend so much of our time at work. If we can have the right kind of support at work and better coaching and better conversations, I think that makes a healthier place for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. And I've heard about your kind of NLP before. Do you bring that into the work you do in workplaces?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, NLP is a great toolkit for having lots of different approaches, lots of different ways of perceiving the world. It can be anything from explaining a concept to somebody, about the way that miscommunication is so easy, and how people genuinely cannot ever see the same thing in the same way, be that the words that somebody's using to the way that we perceive an event. So it's useful as a sort of framework from that because NLP is a very sort of light version of psychology, sociology, anthropology. I mean, the founders of NLP, in the California in the 70s were surrounded by all these amazing people that they sort of took elements from their work, from Fritz Perls, Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, like all these sort of great founders in the field of human cognition, human development.
Mm.
And that's what kind of created the field of NLP. So it can be so useful for giving people some specific questions to ask, ways of phrasing things, or just a whole concept to consider before they approach a meeting as well. So that's why I find NLP is a really useful sort of set of tools to be able to use with people. It's often called the art and science of communication is sort of one of the ways of describing NLP, and I think that works quite well for it in its favor, really.
Yeah, which actually leads very nicely into what does the workplace look like around communication at the moment in particular, with lots of diverse views, lots of diverse thinking, a lot of dynamics that people are finding challenging. So when you think about a mentally healthier workplace, what does that actually look like in practice?
I think the key component, and I know we'll probably sort of touch on things like culture later, but I think a mentally healthy workplace has to start at the top. Yeah, in the way that the leaders lead, be that the C-suite, the CEOs, the people running the business or the founders, whatever it happens to be in the organization that you're in. So I think they have to um, be open and aware to feedback, to communicating well, to learning from mistakes, and then that cascades down through the workplace. People are living in a culture of openness and learning rather than a culture of fear and, do what I tell you, even if you feel like uncomfortable doing it because it's just what I'm saying. And, so going from that very sort of didactic workplace into something that's a lot more expansive and emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent as well. I
Mm,
think emotional intelligence is a big part of what makes a great workplace.
mm,
I often break emotional intelligence down into four pillars. So you've got self-awareness. Am I aware of what's going on within myself right now? How am I feeling? How am I showing up? Maybe what's got me into the state that I'm in, whether that's a positive, empowering state or a maybe not quite so helpful, more negative, spiraling state. Then having that awareness to be able to relate to other people, and self-regulate. So if I am happy and great, fantastic, I'll probably beam that out to everybody around me. But if I'm a little bit peeved off and annoyed and frustrated, how do I manage that state myself with my own self-regulation? Maybe I need to go for a little bit of a walk before I have that discussion or send that fiery email off that I really want to do to that client right now. And then also then, it's around, building good relationships, and that kind of social awareness as well. And I think if leaders and therefore the people who within the teams within the workplace have that overarching set of core skills about themselves and working with others, I think that really starts to develop a platform from which a mentally healthy workplace can really evolve and emerge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that I've been reflecting on what it looks like in practice, do you think it's more difficult knowing some family members who work in very large companies, UK or global? Obviously, the gap between the very top and near to the bottom is a lot wider. So therefore, if it's coming from the top, what does coming from the top what does that look like in a very big organization? Does that need to then feed down into managers lower down and making sure that they're emotionally intelligent and they're demonstrating ways of good working practice?
Yeah, I mean, often that starts in the communication, in the memos and the videos coming out from people. It starts with showing that you are able to learn from your own stuff. Um, I forget which it was one of the founders, or sorry, one of the CEOs of Microsoft. I think I was watching a video about, or could have been Google, can't remember now. But he was talking about how, how he would always admit mistakes in front of people and would always, yeah, have the conversations, would always put a memo out. We screwed this up, this was my decision. This is the thing that we tried and we did, and this is why I thought it was a great idea. We're not going to do that again. We're going to go in this different direction. I hold my hands up to that,
Yeah.
and having that ability to be able to admit that it was your choice and your decision, and this is where stuff like NLP comes in really useful. There are some what we call presuppositions in NLP, and one of them is what we call people are doing the best they can with the resources they have available. Now,
Okay.
those resources might be inner resources, in terms of my state of mind. The difference between a good day and a bad day is not the day, it's the way you show up within the day. So sometimes something can happen in a day, a bit of traffic, an email that you get back from a client, and you can handle it and you go, oh, well, fine, I can cope with this, no problem at all. And other times it's like, ah, we get so fired up, so frustrated,
Yeah.
and that's it. Immediately we're kind of like we're spiraling and all sorts of stuff that then happens. It's not the email or the thing or the traffic or the whatever. It's us.
Yeah.
And so people are doing the best they can with their resources. It's partly our resources, but it's also the resource might be what I know at the time,
Mm.
and we can't therefore go back in time and wish or we might go back and wish we'd known, but we can't go back and have known. So the choices that you make and the things that you do are based on what you know at the time, the training that you have at the time, the information you have available at the time, the how you were in that day at the time. Like, so therefore you also have to go, well, if I had the same set of circumstances again, I'd probably make the same decision because that's why I
Mm.
made it. But
Mm.
later I can learn from it. And
Mm.
and, and I often talk about learning when I'm running workshops and giving talks. Learning is knowledge plus experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we gain some knowledge in something. We read a book about something. We go on a course. We do some training. We learn mental health first aid.
Mhm.
But until we then go and have a conversation with somebody about it, until we apply the principles about what we've learned, that's really learning. And the thing that loops it back around is feedback.
Yeah.
What worked well and what would I do differently next time round? Because I
Yeah.
can't change the past, but what I
Yeah.
can do is change what comes next, and that's
Yeah.
probably the most important thing that comes up.
Yeah, there can be often be a regret. Regret as an emotion can be very powerful, regrets and things, so that you can see that still a lot of the moment. So, where do you
Yeah.
see organizations getting stuck right now?
I think a lot of the places where, and a lot of the conversations I have where people find it difficult in workplaces is how to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
How to approach a colleague without fear of firing them off or upsetting them. Um, and often it's the whole premise that they're approaching a conversation as being difficult.
Mhm.
You know, why can't we just have a conversation? And often it's the sooner you have the conversation, the less it's often gone on, the less you ruminated about it, the more it's still fresh in everybody's mind. So something can be done to change something about it. Like, there's a whole load of stuff around conversations. And if the culture is about the fact that we are learning from the things that we have done. We are learning what works well. We are having retrospectives. We're, unbundling things and looked at the areas where we succeeded and the areas where we'd do something differently the next time round. And if we're having the conversation future focused, not, well, you should have done this and you should have known that and you should have sent that email at that time and had that bit of information available. And if it's always bashing people with a big stick of what they should have done, that's not a conversation. That's not, well, it's a conversation. It's just not a very useful one.
Yeah.
So really making the conversation future focused
Mm.
towards how can we change it next time, towards learning, towards developing. I think those kind of conversations work much better. Be that around a performance review or be that around supporting somebody in day-to-day work.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing, particularly around things like performance reviews, which again is another area I do quite a lot of work in. You know, performance reviews or annual appraisals or six monthlies or whatever your organizations should not be the time when you turn up with all the feedback.
Mm.
That feedback should be happening every day of every week of every time something happens.
Yeah.
And those reviews are about how you responded to the feedback you've been given over that time, not about the project things that happened.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's where people they see themselves as not having enough time to deal with this stuff. But what really happens is it just mounts up to a big pile of crap that we've put under a rug somewhere, and at
Yeah.
some point it'll all come out, and then that makes it far harder to have conversations. So I think that's one of the things I see a lot is people fearing proactive mini interventions because they've not necessarily got the skill set to know how to approach them, how to plan for them, how to even rehearse them themselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And it's something that, yeah, I come across similar things, and time seems to be, time pressures and things are coming in. And there's still, yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. There is still that blame, fear culture, and whose plate does it land on, when things go wrong. And I guess those that are more agile and more open to experimenting and trial and errors and happy with that, they're going to be, better.
And
So
giving people the space to be able to practice.
yes,
People don't often get the space to practice, and I think that's one of
no,
the areas, for instance, where things like AI might come in quite useful.
yeah,
A friend of mine's developing a system to be able to do like difficult conversations, but practice them with an AI avatar. So
yeah,
you effectively tell the avatar what the overall arching situation is about constantly being late or not handing reports in or about, whatever it is. And then you role play out having a difficult, having a conversation with that person, giving them some feedback. And then
yeah,
essentially it can give you some support to look at maybe areas to develop and practice.
yeah, yeah.
Because if learning is knowledge plus experience, the only way we get the experience is by doing it.
Mhm.
And
Yes,
when we're
and
doing
that's what
it
we've come
with a
across.
real person at a real
Yeah,
time for a real situation, sorry to talk over you there. That's what people fear doing. That's probably often why they hold back on doing it. So
yeah. Yes, that's definitely what we find with being educators, that the start is the end of your course, and that's when you go off. And but there's a huge gap there, and we've been experimenting with potentially an AI chat for having mental health conversations.
yeah,
That what could that look like in supporting a colleague at work. But yeah, people are really yearning for the practice. That's a
yeah,
real big thing, the practice.
definitely.
So, what pressures or blind spots do you wish leaders paid more attention to?
That's a great question. Um, I think probably finding out what those blind spots are in the
Mm,
first place.
mhm,
One of the ways of approaching something like that, I did this with an organization. I did quite a lot of work up near Sheffield. And one of the things that we did when they approached and came on a management training program that I ran, we had every person came on 8 sessions across a whole year. It's a big program. Yeah,
mm,
around over about 70 people through this program. And every person coming on to that actually took part in like a 360 review. That 360 review was around getting people to sort of, you know, rate them if you like, or tell them what they thought of that person, um, and also areas that they thought that person could develop in.
Mm,
Um, and often, and this is anonymously done. And some people sent it out to like we got like half a dozen replies for a person, but I think at the most it was like 35 replies. One person they sent it to everybody, and I think that can often give you blind spots because you don't know what you don't know. So how to work on your blind spots is a really difficult one. So first of all, I think trying to find out what those blind spots are. And you
yeah.
can do that sometimes with psychometrics. That can be quite a
Um,
good way of potentially finding out, but it kind of depends on which psychometrics are being used and so forth.
yeah.
Whereas actually, if you put it out to the people day to day who you work with, and you put it out in that 360 way, so people that, suppliers that maybe you work for, work with, they might have an opinion of you, your team, if you manage a team, your manager, your peers, basically anybody that you interact with on a reasonable basis within the business would hopefully have something to say about you, both things that they think you're doing really well and strengths that you have, and also areas for development.
Mm,
And then I think that gives you a bit of a steer around potential blind spots because
mhm.
yeah, it's tricky to know what they are unless we find out what they are.
Yeah.
And we're not going to know what we already don't know, so therefore we'll go out there and ask other people.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, that, isn't it? Because how do we overcome within that understanding of what are my blind spots from others' feedback is just making sure it's not just about perception or someone's personality clash with someone else and they're saying something because they can, that might not ultimately be that true or reflective of that person. So I guess, is it about having as much of that data that then you pull out the really valuable feedback?
Yeah, it's about getting themes, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
what one person has an opinion, um, two people. It's like spotting patterns, isn't it? We do something once is interesting, do it twice, it's more interesting. Do it three times, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
So therefore, if certain words or phrases are coming up, or certain things that people are mentioning in maybe slightly different ways of explaining them, but there's commonality there, then there's probably a theme
Yeah.
to look at that isn't just one person's opinion or one
Yeah.
person's agenda.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's important that the if you're doing that kind of work, that you have enough people involved in that process to be able to give you good sort of qualitative data
Mhm.
from that perspective, so you've got enough to be able to go from. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, you're just dealing with somebody else's, in NLP we call it their map, their opinion,
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
that opinion could be skewed based on some other agenda that you don't know about.
Yeah.
Whereas if half a dozen people say similar things, you go, well, actually, there's probably a theme here as well. So it's important to listen to the themes, not just the one-offs.
Yeah. And do you think leaders also, thinking about that as well, need to be able to receive that well?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if nobody's ever going to listen to your feedback if you also can't receive it yourself. It's really
Yeah.
important to receive it and
Yeah.
to receive it with a view that it is somebody else's opinion,
Yeah.
and it's their point of view and that you have a choice as to whether or not you act or react to it. Um, but yeah, how you receive feedback, and then often what the team are then looking to do is how do you act on the feedback?
Yeah.
Because if you're getting feedback, or and that might be feedback on a project, that might be feedback personally or whatever, and then they see you do nothing with it, it's like, well, I'm not going to bother next time round. I'm not
That's
going to give you
true.
any more feedback because you're just dismissing it and ignoring it anyway. And then that again diminishes the quality of feedback you'll be given in the future.
Yeah.
But if they see you being given feedback and either going, that's really interesting feedback, actually, this was my point of view, or this was my opinion, or this is why I did what I did. You don't have to agree or disagree with it. It's just offering your perspective. Yeah. I think that's really important. And and or actually doing something with it and making a change and going,
Yeah.
cool, I didn't consider things like that. Do you know what? Next time round, if that happens, we'll do something different. And
Yeah.
then do something different with it, actually enact with it as well. Because if they see feedback being offered and then a change happening as a result of the feedback, they'll give more feedback,
Yeah.
and they'll probably give higher quality feedback as well, because they
Yeah.
can see that you are also learning from that as well. And I think good leaders do take into account that feedback and then do something with it as well.
Yeah.
They actually, make steps, particularly in those large organizations where you tend to have more visionary bosses
Yeah.
making much more strategic decisions at a much higher level. that's often the ones where people are much more leading direction to maybe a manager who's a bit more process and procedure and doing the job and doing the role because they've got X, Y, and Z tasks to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that absolutely, and it kind of increases respect and a whole other kind of load of things within the workplace from an employee's perspective, definitely.
Mm.
So, kind of bringing a bit more about the mental health aspect, how has your experience shaped the way you think about mental health at work in particular?
I mean, mental health at work is just so important, isn't it? I think it's a good place and a good opportunity for us to be able to help to support people's mental health generally.
Mhm.
Um, because obviously how we do something is often how we do everything. So just because if we're not having the best day at work, we're probably not having the best day at home,
Mhm.
or in our relationships, or with our kids, or with anything else. One is just a reflection of different aspects within us. So arming people with some ways of dealing with stuff to be able to consider how do they take some different approaches, how do they consider their own well-being, how do they step back, how do they communicate discomfort within themselves. If we can do that well at work, hopefully they can also translate to doing that well at home as well.
Mhm.
And I think considering that within a business, I mean, people ultimately, unless you got a high stock business, but people ultimately are your asset.
Mhm.
Without the people doing those roles, you wouldn't have the business functioning.
Yeah.
And so taking care of the people that work with you or for you or within your organization, within your business, will ultimately pay dividends in terms of the health of the business, in terms of the culture of the business, in terms of the productivity of the business.
Mhm.
So I think, paying attention to mental health is really important because mental health, like physical health, if you've got something physically up with you, um, that does affect how you mentally perform, and how
Mhm.
you mentally perform can physically affect you. And so mistakes happen, and people will be more ill, and they will have more bugs, and they will have stuff happening to them that will affect
Mhm.
the way they show up, if there's some sort of mental load or something happening to them as well. And that need not come from the workplace. This could be stuff that's happening to them, externally. There could be things happening with their children or with their parents or with their family or with their friends or with their finances or all sorts of stuff that will affect the way that they show up. But when you're at work, you have the ability to show some care towards people, to
Mhm.
support them, so that maybe work becomes the place where actually they feel they can be the most productive and the most themselves
Yeah.
rather than the least.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we make the connection between the two that not everyone kind of, does kind of see that well that some people think the home stuff's the home stuff, leave it there, and the work stuff, it's like, well, actually, when people are having difficult times at home, it does show up in the workplace. It shows up in all sorts of ways, from frustration to poor communication to poor results and productivity, to just not
Mm.
feeling great in what you're able to do at work. So we do, yeah. And actually the other thing I think that's come up for those that live on their own or maybe have levels of isolation and loneliness, a workplace can be a place of connection.
Yeah.
And it can actually be a place where the workplace has an opportunity to spot something that might be going on, that they can help and intervene in, and provide that support that then results in a better home life for that person. So yeah, they are very hugely interlinked, with each other, without a doubt. So, what do you think helps workplaces move from tick boxing to real culture change? This is something I've been talking about in 2025 quite a lot.
Mm.
What's your thoughts on that one?
I mean, I think having a really sort of clued in and switched on people team
Mhm.
within the organization is really essential. Um, and maybe a team that consider themselves a people team, not just an HR function within that as well. I mean, I know an awful lot of HR professionals. I have a lot of time for people who do those roles, and it's interesting that some of the organisations that I work at, it is an HR function. So therefore, you have somebody doing the onboarding and the offboarding of people and skill sets and that kind of stuff. But it's quite a functional role when it's considered just with that.
Mm.
Some organizations have an L&D team, which also has
Mhm.
an HR function. And that's a little bit more about learning and development. Obviously, that's what it means. But that's often a bit more about maybe workshops and skills and training and helping to develop the people within that as well. But I think some of the best organizations have a people team. There's one game studio up in Liverpool that I did work with last year, and they have a they call it POPs, People Operations Team,
Yeah, that's a good
which
one.
incorporates HR and L&D and just considers people as people. So I think from the point of view of not just tick boxing, I mean, yes, have we done all of our mandatory stuff? Great. But what else can we be supporting people with in their own learning development? Do we have a little fun for people to be able to go off and get to networking events and to choose stuff that they want to go to be able to peer chat with people? Do we do little peer group sessions where people you can just, you know, talk to people who are maybe doing the similar function to them, but in different groups or different areas or in different projects. And there's loads to be learned just from peer group discussions. And facilitating those internally needn't require getting an external trainer like myself to come in and do it, although obviously some people do, but
Mm.
just facilitating the chance for people to learn from each other, learn from people a little bit higher up the ladder from them as well. I did some work with a games company where we actually got people who were now directors within this company. The games company is based in France, and they came in and the director shared basically how they'd screwed up
Mm.
and
Mm.
what they learned from how they screwed up. So that
Yeah.
people then in the communications team or the marketing teams could go, oh, well, if, XYZ that I really respect did this thing when they were a junior, at
Mm.
least, and they learned this from it, I can kind of take something from that. I think that's really useful.
Yeah.
And I think the other point in terms of it not just being tick box in the culture, and I had a great definition of culture when I was at an HR summit earlier in 2025, was culture is determined as being the lowest tolerated behavior.
Ah.
And I
Mhm.
thought that's a great way of explaining culture, isn't it? Because culture is not, do we have a couple of pool tables and a really good coffee machine and we have pizza Fridays?
Yeah.
And culture is not, we have a 4-day working week. Culture is not whatever you put it on your website to be, or your values, or your behaviors, or your mission statement.
Yeah.
Culture is what people ultimately can get away with, or is the lowest tolerated form of behaviors that people have.
Mm. Yeah.
And that starts all the way from the top to the bottom. And so
Yeah.
if there is toxicity within the workplace, if there are behaviors that are happening, the things that are occurring that are not great, um, depending often at the level at which they happen, they will ripple through the business. And if it's tolerated and accepted, once it's found out about, because you can't know everything that happens everywhere all the time, then people go, that tends to then set the standard for the business. And I think that's where a lot of culture ultimately comes down to as well. And of course,
Mhm.
you have to lead by doing what you're expecting people to see as well.
Mhm.
There's no point in laying down a set of rules or behaviors and then not doing them yourself as well, because
Mhm.
people will see straight through that as well. So I think when health and well-being is not just something that's, oh well, we've got a couple of mental health first aiders, we've ticked the
Mm.
box. Well,
Yeah.
how do we make sure people know that these people exist? How do we facilitate those discussions? Do those people get the chance to hold little small groups for drop-in things for people
Mhm.
to talk about stuff? Like, how are we making sure that it's not just, oh, we've ticked a box because we're trying to get our Investors in People award, and
Mm.
how do we actually make sure that it's something that sits well and comfortably within the culture of the business?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very, very good point that as well. And when I think about some of the increasing rates of tribunals over the last
Mm,
kind of few years as well that have been around this very topic of culture and bullying and intimidation and whole variety of different behaviors that have, brought in a potential, kind of lead up to a tribunal, but also thinking about people that have not felt able to take it as far as the tribunal because
yeah.
it's a big process to go that way.
And
A
that's where
lot
a
of
lot
it
of
has
the
been around culture, hasn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I do quite a lot of work in the computer games industry as well. And there's been quite a, this seems to be an extra push in terms of unionizations becoming
Mhm.
are quite a hot topic in that area as well, particularly
Yeah.
with a lot of layoffs and a lot of studios closing and a lot of
Yeah.
perception that maybe some of these much bigger studios are getting away with quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's been quite a big pushback
Yes.
from that within those industries as well. Again, the point of union really is representation,
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
support, is having somebody to be able to help you to represent you when stuff happens as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's interesting how some of these things are sort of evolving in that kind of direction as well. And ultimately, given the choice, people will just leave. They will vote with their
Yeah.
feet and they'll go.
Yeah.
But of course, with the job market that's tricky and difficult, people are having to tolerate more than they probably are comfortably able to tolerate or
Yeah.
would normally tolerate. They can't just leave or just go. Sometimes if the marketplace just is not available for that as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, staff
Which,
turnaround and retention is an important thing to look at. If you're going into a business where they've had a very high turnover, I'd be asking why.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing that goes takes us back a little bit further back in our conversation is that the impact that that has on people's home lives is quite significant as well. And
Yeah.
that's where relationship breakdowns happen and all sorts of things happen because of that inability to move on from a workplace that you are struggling to stay at because of whatever reason. So there
And of
is the
course,
bigger
once
picture
you've
to
had that
that.
experience, sorry, once you've had that experience in one place, you'll
Yeah,
take that into the next, like
you
any
feel very
relationship. So
nervous.
you'll already be nervous going into the next one, hoping it's not as bad as the last one. Um, because like anything, that's if that's what we've had, it might be kind of what we're expecting to get.
Yeah,
And that can make the next one even trickier. Like the next one's got to be stupendously amazing for you to be able to let go of that fear that you've probably gotten if you've been burnt previously somewhere as well.
yeah,
And that can really affect people's own mental health before they even start going through an interview process, let alone anything else.
that's right.
Because
That's
they'll fear that they themselves made that mistake of choosing the wrong company. But
yeah,
again, you only know what you knew at the time you made that decision. If everything seemed great, if all the reviews were brilliant, if your person interviewing you was amazing, if maybe the first 2 years was great and then something changed, like at those points with those decisions, that's why you made them.
yeah, yeah. And it doesn't take much to change something, an environment somewhere. It can be just a personnel change, change of,
Yeah.
leader or change of manager or change of circumstances at home. It just, it can be anything. It's so dynamic now, that leads people to be struggling, going forward. So if you could change one thing that would improve people's daily working lives, what would it be?
I think the encouragement for people to just utilize all the stuff that you already have, to get yourself into a good state before you go into a meeting or into the workplace. Use your physiology, use your body, if you're able to, get out for a walk, you get fresh air in. Don't just rush from place to place. Spend a little bit of time being that a little bit more mindful, center yourself. Like all these things, they don't cost you anything to do,
Mhm.
but they can make a big difference to the way that you show up. I know when I'm at my most frustrated, my most upset, my most annoyed, my most that they're the times when I don't want to take the dog for a walk, when I just need to stay at this computer to work
Yeah,
extra hard.
yeah,
And that's not what I need. What I need is an air gap, is a break,
yeah,
to be able to just get that little bit of perspective.
yeah.
So I think using your own resources to do that. That might be music. Stick on a playlist of you know, I like Foo Fighters and rock music and that kind of stuff. That's the sort of stuff that does a bit of a brain reset for me. So just something where whatever's gonna shift your state of mind to get yourself into a better state, I think is by far one of the best resources that you've got. So whether
Mhm.
that literally is getting out for a quick break or a walk around the corner and back again, and just that little bit of a chance to breathe and remember deep breathing as well.
Mm,
Your body's got the autonomic nervous system, and you've got two halves. You've got your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is your flight or fight response. So when we feel under attack, when we feel frustrated, when we feel, we've got something wrong, that we've got that email into that thing, it fires off our, you know, flight or fight response, which is great, when we needed to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Not so useful when it's about the Q4 email spreadsheet that's got the wrong zero in it somewhere, but it still gets fired off.
yeah,
and your body's got the ability to be able to calm itself down, which is what the parasympathetic nervous system is all about. So, that lowers your cortisol levels. It lowers your ups your oxytocin, and just gives yourself that ability to take a step back, and you can access that through deep breathing. You know,
Yeah.
basically breathe in for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 8.
Yeah.
And by doing that, by really breathing in deeply and breathing out, so you absolutely empty those lungs in nice, long, deep breaths, you
Yeah.
will feel differently after that as well. And can only take, 3, 4, 5 repetitions of that breathing to feel differently as well. So
Yeah.
get yourself outside for a little bit, or get yourself on a little walk around and focus on the breathing, and you will feel differently. It doesn't change what's happened. The thing that was firing off your state will still be there, but if you're in a better place to be able to at least take action on it rather than doing it from a flight or fight response, doing it with a little bit more measured, yeah, and never be afraid to ask for help. You don't know what you don't know. So, yeah, the earliest opportunity, discuss it, talk about it, get feedback from it, get a perspective on it. You've got blind spots on it. So if you're able to get other people to help to support you with it as well. People like helping people.
Mm. Mm.
So don't be afraid to ask for support, even if it's a coach, even if it's a mental health first aider. Then they can't, and remember that person can't fix it for you, but just the very act of talking it through with somebody
Mhm.
can, for yourself, give you some perspective when you hear those words come out your mouth as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, use the stuff. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go on a complex course about it. Change your state and get some support, I think is probably what I'd say.
Yeah, that's interesting that with the conversations I had just before Christmas with people in kind of environments that were causing a lot of, challenges that sometimes the very basics could actually help with. And I think for many of us, we ignore those very simple, basic things. Almost, I don't know what the mindset is behind that. Sometimes it's maybe we're not very, but we're often much better at supporting others than we are ourselves.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a bit of denial. I just don't want to kind of look at it just now. But also some of the conversations I had is, well, what difference will that really make?
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah, the basics actually do really help, like the breathing, as you say, and the kind of taking a step back and trying to slow down. I think never have we been in such an environment of speed.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that is really interrupting people's ability to go, wait a minute, I do need to take a step back. I do need to do a bit of breathing because
You
it's
don't
like,
need to reply to that email straight away when it comes in,
no, no, no. But
you know?
it's amazing how many people have that need to,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you
this
can you
was
can you can you can draft a reply, but don't send it. Then take a
exactly,
step back from it, leave it overnight, and come back to it in the morning.
yeah,
Those things can happen. Often, why it's easier, by the way, to think about other people's problems is you are only focusing on the problem.
yes,
You're not focusing on all the if only I had, all the values stuff, all the beliefs, things that sit in the background when you're trying to deal with your own thing. You've
yeah,
got all of that history that you're dealing
yeah,
with, not
yeah.
just the thing itself.
That's right.
So, but yeah, I would say always encourage people to get coaching.
Mm,
Coaching
mhm,
is such a useful process
mhm,
to go through, no matter what the coach is trained in or whatever.
mm.
Get somebody who's able to help you to listen to you and ask you good questions about what you can do about it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
difference between a coach and a mentor is a coach is about supporting you to come up with your answers. A mentor is about somebody who has knowledge in the subject in which you are approaching them on and can then guide you with their skill and experience. But
yeah.
even when I'm training mentors how to mentor, I always encourage them to make sure they coach first and
Ah,
then mentor when the client has reached the extent of their experience. That's
that's
when you come
really
in with mentor.
interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting because I've had more mentoring than I've had coaching.
Mm.
And yeah, I never thought of it about the kind of actually the interlink between the two. So you kind of recommend the coaching before moving on to mentoring.
Yeah, it's in encourage a person. So, how would you be approaching this? If you were me, what would you think you would be doing? And asking those kind of questions first, rather than just giving them the answer.
Yeah,
Because there's the acronym WAIT. I don't know if you've heard of that, which is a
no,
good one for coaching. So, in anything, if anybody ever comes to you with a problem, right, hold in the back of your mind the acronym WAIT, which is why am I talking? So often, why am I talking is around. well, I've got the answer. It's so obvious. I need to give them to this. You know, I'm excited. I want to tell them, I can fix this for them. I can shortcut them. But the problem is that when you do that for somebody, they'll keep coming back to you for the answer. They'll be really grateful. You'll shortcut it for that thing, yes. But if you truly teach people how to learn things for themselves,
Mm,
then when somebody comes up with an aha moment, and I'm sure, as a coach and facilitator, you'll have had these moments in your clients as well. I know I get them in my clients. Like when somebody goes, "Oh, that's how I could be doing." Yes, okay, and they come up with that for themselves. It's like it's truly like a little light bulb comes on but stays on.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the important things to facilitate as well in people,
yeah,
is people's ability to be able to give themselves advice.
yeah,
Because when they've learned how to do that, they can keep learning how to do that.
yeah,
And when they keep knowing how to do that, then that makes a big difference to them.
yeah. Yeah, it's more powerful and reduces kind of learned helplessness and kind of yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, which is great. So, a couple of like final questions. One before the kind of very ending of about hope. For people who hold influence, what does using it well look like?
Um, I think using your influence well is about showing what it is you'd like to have happen. Doing what you say you like others to be doing is one of them,
Mm,
practicing what you're preaching in
mm,
effect. I think that's really important. And also using that influence to be able to make sure your team are investing in themselves, to be able to understand more about themselves. That's why I love going into organizations that want NLP training or want communication training or want review training or want, support on that stuff because it shows that if you're able to teach the team to know more about themselves, it doesn't solve one thing. It's ultimately could solve loads of things if the
mm.
team take that on board. And also people genuinely who are looking to invest in a series of stuff and not just a one hit and done.
Yeah.
I have so many people that go, "Well, could you come and run a workshop for 90 minutes on communication skills to fix my team?"
Mm,
It's like, well, I can run a 90-minute session to talk about communication, but it's not going to fix your team. You know, you want a little series of workshops and some group coaching and like, ultimately, putting putting something in place where it's a series of stuff may start to get there with that, but
mm,
just expecting a sort of one and done approach
yeah.
um, is not always the best
Yeah.
thing to do. So again, if you've got influence over the budgets, influence over um, the giving people the time as well. That's the other thing. Yeah, on that big program that I ran with the 70 managers over 8 sessions, so many of those managers were getting pulled back by their line managers. Oh, don't skip the training today. We're too busy. And it's in those we're too busy times when it's the most important time for them to come on do this stuff
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
giving them a skill that's going to stay with them for all the busy times, not just
Yeah.
skipping this one right now as well. So yeah, recognizing the importance of doing that kind of investment in the team
Yeah.
stuff, I think is really important.
Yeah, I had similar before Christmas where people, yeah, were missing sessions and being pulled into so many other things. And I think that's a reflection of 2025 for me as well, is give people a time
Yeah.
for this very topic we're talking about,
Yes.
whatever that looks like. And I think it actually goes nicely into the final kind of question because the hope is that we can actually start to understand what giving people a bit more time looks like. But given the current landscape, what still gives you hope? We're still in very challenging times, I would say, in the workplace.
Mm.
It's still very unpredictable, uncertain, very dynamic, influenced by lots of things externally, politically, environmentally. What still gives you hope?
I think what still gives me hope is that people genuinely want to have a good time at work. They genuinely want to work with their peers. They genuinely want to show up and have a time and a place that they can go to where it feeds their soul and nourishes them rather than feels like a chore.
Yeah,
And I think genuinely people want that, whether the environment or whether the setup contributes towards that is another thing. But I think genuinely people want that from their life. And I think genuinely also people are not afraid to move if they don't get it. And again, I think that's where if you've got a big high turnaround in a team or in an area or a thing, you should be looking at that because you need to be able to not just from the bottom line of the business, but just from the health and the support within the teams that you've got within there as well. There's something happening,
Mhm.
It's a bit like talk about physical first aid. It's a bit like having a wound that keeps on going even though you stuck a plaster on it. There's something wrong. The plaster's not doing enough.
Yeah,
So what can we do to really deal with the cause rather than the symptoms of the cause as well?
yeah,
So I think there is hope that people do want to become aware of that, that they are investing in people. There is still, you know, we need good, functional, happy, supportive people in the workplace in order for the work to be done. You know, most workplaces are not going to be overtaken by robots,
mhm,
or AI systems or agents or whatever the next variant of the AI thing will be. People still want relationships with people. They still want to be able to genuinely chat to people and to get supported by them. Yeah, great. Let's use the tools to speed things up and to get stuff done a bit quicker. But
mm,
it's still the people getting the stuff done. And the other hope I have is the people reflecting that they know that things are skills to be learnt,
mm,
and that they don't yet know everything, and they are open to the learning of something. I wrote a book last year called Leadership is a Skill, and the reason it's called Leadership is a Skill is because I believe leadership is something that can be learnt. Like it's not an inherent superpower that you're just suddenly imbued with because you happen to be given a team to manage or because you've been there the longest. So I think that's the other hope is that genuinely people know that the stuff that they don't yet know is something that they can learn.
yeah,
And I think we've got that going into 2026. I hope that
yeah,
that is something that will give people that ability to be able to look forward to being at work.
yeah. Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is there are jobs that are going to be created that we don't even know are a thing yet.
Yeah.
And likewise, we have seen certain roles disappear over the last, 5 to 10 years as well. So
Hmm.
it's the hope is to replace those with new skills, new types of roles, new types of jobs that still involve people, assisted with AI. So we need that hope there as well, and I think the hope for allowing people a little bit more time for this topic, rather than seeing kind of AI as something that's going to help people do more,
Yes,
and fill in
exactly.
all the gaps with their time. We don't we need to push back against that, don't we?
Yeah. And hopefully to free up time for learning, free up time for development, free up time for we often talk about your jar of coping. There's only so many things you can cope with in any one day, and certain things add to your jar, and then it overflows, and then you've had enough. And other things like going for that walk, take some stuff out of that jar, and then you've got a bit more space in it for the things that come along next.
Yeah,
So hopefully that we can spend a bit more time emptying our jar rather than filling it up.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely a big hope, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Andy, before we kind of finish up for today? Kind of any reflections on just what we've been chatting about?
No, I mean, I think the key area really is just reflecting, no matter where you are within the team, whether you lead the team, a part of a team, leading on projects. I mean, you're still a leader within the area of the business that you're in. Is lead with that integrity, lead with the best that you can, um, and know that you will screw it up and get it wrong, and that genuinely, generally, that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you learn from that and as long as you communicate what's going on to other people around you as early as possible, rather than trying to avoid it. The problem is so many people are avoiders of conflict. That's by
Yeah.
far the biggest way of coping with conflict.
Yeah.
So try to look at things that go wrong, or things that are happening as how can I collaborate with people that know more than me to learn from them? Because that's how we've always learned.
Mhm.
We hang out with people who know more than us. We copy them. Yeah, we learn from them, or we get mentored by them, or we just, notice how they do what they do, and then we try it out and we repeat it. I mean, that's how we learn when we're young. We don't have an instruction manual for how to walk and how to talk. Like we watch and observe the people around us, and then we mimic and copy them.
Mm.
So, keep taking that approach into your working life, and know that you are going to fall over, you are going to get it wrong, you are going to trip over things to begin with, and that's okay. And also expect that to happen within your team,
Yeah.
within some boundaries and within some frameworks, within, not life business changing, you know, things that can absolutely go wrong. We don't want a Lehman Brothers on our hands here. But what you do want to know is that, and have to expect, is that people are not going to be able to do what you do without them making the same failures you probably did when you were at the stage they're at.
Yeah.
Um, and so therefore, do your best to allow them to know and navigate how to learn. Like
Yeah.
learning how you learn. If you could
Yeah.
have one thing, learn about how you learn.
Yeah.
And then just keep that feedback process going. What worked well? What would I do differently next time round?
Yeah.
Because that by far, I think, is a great skill set moving forward.
Mhm. Well, great endings on that one. Thanks so much, Andy, for joining us today. It's been absolutely great discussion. And for everyone else, I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Thanks so much,
See you
Catherine. It's
next.
great to be here with you.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.